Hi, Natalie.
Hey.
Hey, thanks for being here today. I have a sense of curiosity around what we're going to talk about. We talked about it a little bit, but I just feel like you have a lot of good things to share, so I'm happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
So before we get into who Natalie is, we are going to start as we do with a little opening, centering, and meditation. And today we are going to do the orientating. So for those of you who have been listening for a while now, you can go ahead and start that and just sort of let my noise be in the background. And for those of us who are doing it for the first time, this is a somatic experiencing exercise. And all we have to do is allow our eyes to wander around our space. Of course, if you're doing an activity and listening to this podcast at the same time and it's not safe for you to have your eyes wander, just start to connect to your breath. And for the rest of us, we'll allow our eyes to be curious about what's in our space right now. And allow the eyes to guide you. So allow that peripheral vision to expand enough that your eyes can sort of be curious when you catch something out of the corner of your eye and you wonder, oh, what's over there? Even if it's a familiar space, you might notice things that you never really paid attention to before. Also allowing the head and neck to move with the eyes. And let your eyes land on something that is particularly attractive to you today, for whatever reason. And just notice what your body and your breath are doing. And really take in the qualities of that thing that your eyes are really curious about. Maybe it sparks a memory or a sensation or an emotion. And then we'll close our eyes, allow the head to come back to center if it's not there already. And just really feel those qualities and how that thing is speaking to your body and your breath. Maybe there's a quality in there that you want to bring with you through your day. So let's take 3 breaths together. If you feel like you need to move some energy, you can exhale through the mouth. And if you feel like you need to conserve some energy, we just exhale through the nose. And just doing these breaths on your own time. Feeling your seat on your chair or the feet on the ground, wherever you are. And then for those of us with eyes closed, let's open our eyes softly. So it's funny, my eyes got drawn to my Mexico blanket from when I first went to Yandara. And I was like, that's hilarious. It's in this room all the time. And I look at it often, but never in these exercises. And why I'm saying that for those of you who are listening is because that's where Natalie and I met, was in Mexico at a yoga institute called Yandara. And I just happened to be a teacher assistant to the training that she was taking years ago. That was a long time ago. That was like
was a long time ago.
8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah, now it is. Oh my, yeah. It seems, and it's funny, I'm sitting on mine.
Yeah. Awesome. So Natalie, as you know, is a yoga teacher, but she's also a yoga therapist, and that's really where her practice and her career really thrives, is in yoga therapy. And she's also an author, a speaker, and a mental health advocate, and she very much lives and embodies these things. And Natalie and I stayed in touch after Yandara. We just kind of had a sweet connection around shamanism and sort of more esoteric healing modalities, and we've kind of been back and forth, just being in touch over different things and watching each other's careers really start to thrive after all those years ago when we were on the beach of Mexico. You know, and I actually remember too, one of the fondest memories I have about you is, so I've been teaching yoga since 2006, and I've been practicing since I was 18. So, you know, many years before that. And when I met you, you were very inflexible, and my natural body makeup, because of my adrenals and just because of how my body grew, is I will be one of those yoga practitioners that will maybe never be able to fully do the splits or anything like that. And I just had to accept that. And you were there. And I remember years later watching your body start to open as you like dove deeper into your practice. I'm like, dang, she can do that. And I had this like, I had this moment of like really being like excited to watch your body change, but also this feeling of like, oh, you know, it'd be fun to do the splits and just the funny things that we have. And not that it, not that it matters. I mean, I always think with the body, it's like, it's fun to try things, and it's fun to be able to do things, and being able to accept where you're at and where your body's at is just obviously a lot healthier. But it's funny how the mind, you know, and it was never like a jealousy thing or anything. It was more of like this, like, you know, just feeling like, wow, you've done a lot of work and you've done really great things in your life, and and having a moment, an opportunity to, and not just only in the physical realm, obviously. It just shows, you know, it shows when you see, and I'm sure you witness this too, now that you've been teaching for quite a few years. It's an amazing thing to witness your students really transform, or the people that you work with, their bodies transform. And, you know, flexibility or strength is just one way that they transform. So it's a really cool thing to see. And I never really felt like you were my student. I always felt like you were more of a colleague anyway. So there was never that there either, but it's just kind of funny.
Well, I have so many fond memories of Yondaran and teacher training. And it's funny that you even recognize that, because I am such a stiff person. Like I was such a stiff. And for people that are on the podcast, like you think that you have to be flexible to do yoga. That's not a true statement. That's beyond flexibility to engage with your body in a way that is constantly evolving and changing, but finding that level of acceptance is a work in progress for all of us. Like I do not know I don't know very many women who really don't compare. Like this sense of comparison, like it's so hard not to. And in yoga settings, it's like, I feel like it's gotten worse. I don't know if it's just like, it's Instagram or like, it's not the media's fault. It's just, I guess, you know, when you think about the whole aspect of the self and the I and how you identify, it's so easy to get caught up in how you're not measured up. Even if it's just like my hamstrings wouldn't work. Like it took me 2 years to touch my toes. That's dedication. 2 years to touch my toes. And it was like one of the happiest moments of my life when I reached it, because you never thought it was going to come. You just worked for it. And then it just came that one day. And then I had that was my new range of motion. So thank you for noticing.
And I totally agree. You know, it's not, it is like, I had that moment of comparison, right? But I was like, you know, I had kind of accepted a long time ago that my body is just, the makeup of it is just the way it is. And, and it is funny. And I, you know, I think it's an important conversation that a lot of yoga teachers are having, how, quite often yoga practitioners don't post their journey to the point of, you know, where they're going. They only post once they're like, oh, I'm there, and look at me, now I can fully do this pose. And you know, and it's just and it's not that we shouldn't strive to be able to do handstand or to be able to do Hanumanasana or, you know, any of those things, but, you know, knowing that the goal is not the destination, you know, or the, you know, getting there is not like it's the journey to get there. And whether we get there or not, it's the practice, like you said, like the dedication that really matters. And you thought you'd never be able to do it. And then there you go. You know, I was the same way. I couldn't touch my toes until 3 years in of practicing yoga. So Anyways, we have more important stuff to talk about. Yeah. Yoga teachers can kind of get into that place of just rambling on. So Natalie has an amazing, she has her business with yoga therapy, but she has an amazing journey and story to share with us today. And that it's going to touch on many points of different things that you've had to do and how your own practice, but also really stepping, one thing I admire about your story is you kind of like, you faced your fears and you stepped into them. So you not only, struggled with mental health yourself, you decided to be an advocate for mental health. And, with what's going on with your mother, you decided to be, the president of that charity in your area. And that's something that I was just like, wow, it's not that you're just facing your fears, you're getting involved with them and really looking at them. So I don't know where you want to start with your story, but I just love for you to talk maybe first about that. Like how did you, and I'm sure your story will come out of this question, is why did you decide to kind of get like, it's like you faced it, but then you like went into it.
Okay, so that's a little bit of stuff to unpack, but we'll unpack it. So why I faced it and then went into it. So let's give the listeners a little bit of background. So what did I face? I was born into a family with a rare genetic disorder called Huntington's disease. It is a neurological disorder that causes brain degeneration in various parts of the brains at different times. This disease is like having ALS, dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's all in one disease. It is probably the best of the worst neurological disorders. I like to make jokes because that's how I coped for my whole life. So if I sound coy about different things and mental health, it's just the way that I've learned to navigate the hardships of the world. So hopefully
humor
you
is
guys
great.
will enjoy that.
Humor is great. It's good medicine.
Yeah, it's very good medicine. So I was born into a family with Huntington's disease, and so I've watched people in my family get sick, from my grandfather to a few cousins when I was growing up. When I was little, I really didn't know much about it other than my grandfather had these funny peculiarities. He would shake, he would have a little bit of outbursts, and my grandmother and him used to fight like cats and dogs over stuff. And so you kind of just saw it from the outside. And it wasn't until my mom got sick that I realized the kind of like what I was in for. So that was the kind of the moment where I faced my own mortality in that way, where I was like, oh, well, now it's my mom. My grandfather was easy for me to care for. I spent the last 7 years of his life with him, in and out of the home and spending like as much time as I can with him. He was so easy to care for. I think that's because it's more of the grandparent, and you have this love that's, it's different than a parent. When you're a parent, you have a different kind of attachment to them. So when my mom got sick, she wasn't working and I was living with her on my own. It was the first time I had understood the genetic portion of the disease. So that was very difficult to cope with, not just because I knew my mom would end up like my grandfather eventually, and I didn't know in what time frame that would look like. This is a very difficult disease to treat because there's not really any treatment, so there's no cure for it. But also because it hits people very differently from person to person, from family to family. So you don't know what's really going to happen until it happens, and then you have to cope with that reality. So when my mom got diagnosed, I was 20 years old. It was a few years before you and I had met, before I did teacher training. And after she was diagnosed, I was in a car accident and I was left in chronic pain. And I spent a year of my life not being able to work. So imagine I'm 21 years old. I can't work. My mom's getting sick. I have a history of trauma and mental health issues to start. So my starting point was a little bit crazy. So that added to that was just ended up being me isolated and alone. And so I knew that I didn't know then that this would happen. This is where I would be now. But the work I do now is because I understand that isolation and feeling like aloneness.
Mm-hmm.
So why did I step into leadership roles and why am I doing the work that I'm doing? Because there's a lot of people who may have been feeling like how I was feeling and how I kind of still feel about different aspects of the disease process and what caregiving is like. So for me, I need to give pain and suffering a value.
Mm-hmm.
So how I live life is whatever has been painful, whatever I have gone through, for whatever reason I went through it, I'm going to give it a value. So if that means someone else can suffer less, then for me, it was worth going through it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think that speaks to your personality and how, not all of us are leaders, but when we do have that leadership quality or we hear that call, it's so important to step into that role because, isolation is something that's very real. I don't have one client right now in my one-on-one work that doesn't feel isolated. All of them are. And it's not that the community isn't there. It's just that when you're in that moment and there's so much going on and it's hard to even get out of bed or, even take care of yourself, let alone be caring for someone else at the same time, the time and energy to reach out and to reach out with this feeling of like, who is going to want to be around me right now?
Who cares? And I'm miserable and I'm not pleasant, right? Because you're not necessarily pleasant to be around.
No.
And so it's hard even to know you need somebody around you because sometimes you feel, or at least I felt, and I know a lot of my other clients with mental health issues feel like we don't want to bother anybody. We have this, I don't want to bother them with my problems. I don't want to bring them down. And then sometimes people are not great to talk to. If you talk to the wrong person and you have some stuff going on, it can actually make it worse. So I had that experience too. And I know a lot of people have had that experience as well. And so then that discourages you from a different kind of interaction. So what I'm hoping to do with the work that I'm doing is to open up not just a dialogue, but a space, and also give people the opportunity to talk or engage with somebody who cares about what you're going through, who can empathize, not feel sorry for you, not, it's like, oh, poor baby, I wish it was different, because I can't wish that on somebody. I can't wish your life was different.
Yeah.
All I can do is say, this is a life you've been handed. Here are some resources, tools, techniques, routines to put into place so that you can face whatever life is going to throw at you, because you don't know if this is the worst of it. That's the truth.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing we talk about a lot in somatic experiencing is like we are focusing basically on that as well, is how can we set up the body and the nervous system to be able to, one, come complete and heal from past trauma, but also to set yourself up so that whatever happens in the future you can approach it with more grace and ease and be able to work through it a lot easier than being triggered into old patterns and old ways that are not supportive of healing and growth.
Yeah.
And that also that space, of having, I call it breaking the silence, and I'm excited to see that more and more people are breaking the silence around mental health and chronic disease and all those things that are, controversial to talk about. It's really amazing. I do see you being out there and not being quiet about it and being like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I've been through, and doing it in a really matter of fact way versus kind of sugarcoating it or not being okay to talk about it. And still sometimes, I'm really open about people will be like, oh, can you connect at this time tomorrow? And I say, no, I'm going to my therapist tomorrow at that time. And it's sometimes funny, the people's reactions. They're kind of like, oh,
you need that?
Yeah,
you need that?
Yeah. And I'm like, I do way better when I see my therapist once a week.
Oh, for 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you said you had, you had a background of trauma and mental health. So what were the mental health issues that you have worked through, and I imagine are still working with, you know, on some level. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Cause they don't just disappear.
No.
Even after like a decade of work where you're kind of like, am I done yet? Like, did I fix this? You're like, nope, it's still wired in.
Yeah.
So, so when I was growing up, from, I would say probably about 12 years old, I realized I was depressive. Like I didn't know that word, but I hated everything. I hated life, generally didn't want to be alive. Everything made me miserable. I was very, even isolated then. I didn't have a really great childhood in terms of, I hate the word being bullied in school, but that's exactly from my earliest childhood memories. It wasn't pleasant for me to be in school. It wasn't pleasant to me to be at home. And so I had my nervous system wired very funny based on the input that I had. And I'll say that from like a neurological perspective. That's how I look at things. That's how I cope with them now, from like a scientific to break it down. This happened. This is the results. This is why I'm dealing with this as an adult kind of thing. So I had depression issues. I had body dysmorphia. I still have body dysmorphia. I'm not completely over that hurdle. And that didn't get even looked or touched until like just a few years ago, like till I was in like my third teacher training, because I didn't know, first of all, like I didn't know. I thought everybody was like how I was, because I was isolated. So this is another problem of isolation, is that you spend so much time alone that you think whatever your experience is how the world works. And it's not necessarily how the world works. It's just how you perceive the world to work from your very narrow lens of perception that you have when you're in that. So to give viewers or people who are not listening, I am a very thin person by nature, by birth. My mom's thinness. I don't have a obesity problem in my family. And yet I still went through periods of thinking I was quote unquote fat or too skinny, and then too fat at the same time. And working with a therapist was super helpful for that, because I didn't know that I had two contradicting views held at the same time. That's a very weird thing to realize, that how could you be both? From physical, like how could you be both? It's very weird to wrap your head around. So I dealt with that, and I started to unpack that more as I got into my healing journey. So pretty much my healing path started after the car accident, after my mom was diagnosed, where I really like hit the wall on what am I going to do with what this is happening, because I'm not going to survive with this. Like, this is out of my control. And my lifeline, my first point of contact was opening a Vitality magazine and seeing an ad for a sweat lodge. All of a sudden I was like, a sweat lodge. I have no idea about shamanism. I have no idea about these other modalities. I've not researched it. And I just was like, I just need to call these people. I called, I made an intention to go. I went by myself to a stranger's house, hoping that I wasn't going to be murdered or something, just because I was so like I had nowhere else to go. I had no one else to talk to. I couldn't talk to my family. I had no friends at that point. I just had like one friend, and maybe my mom, and like my dog, and that was it. That was who I spent time with. And I wasn't working because I was still in a lot of chronic pain and I couldn't physically work. So I did that. I just took like a leap of faith. I had a call to do it. I opened up a random thing and saw it, and then I took a chance, and it ended up being my saving grace. It was like my entrance into being able to create the network I needed as everything would unfold in my adulthood. So it was like the catalyst where I had my back against the wall, and there was nowhere else for me to go.
Yeah. And those points, you know, I've brought this up before, and it seems like it's a common thing where all of a sudden, and I was talking about this in my support group that I host last night. I was talking about how when you're ready, you're ready, and you need to be ready. And it is that moment of like, this is what's going to help. I don't know if it is, but I just know that this is what I need to do. And I'm done. Like something's got to change, you know, and those points are really important points to take notice of and to dig into. So I was talking about like really digging into those points and just kind of going for it and committing as best you can. And as you and I both know, that there's those moments where we have lots of momentum moving forward, and then it feels like, oh, we're moving backwards.
Yes.
You know, but that moment of like, this is, my life's going to change, you know, and there is a feeling of like, I know my life's going to change. And then there's kind of like no looking back, even though I've witnessed myself going to, for me, a lot of relapse or backwards movement with my health, with my chronic stuff. But there is always that moment of like, okay, I got to do this again. You know, that recommitment piece.
Yeah.
So it's really, I like highlighting those moments because I think they're really important.
I think those are the most important moments. When I see people too in my personal practice, I deal with a lot of chronic issues, chronic pain, mental health, and now moving more into the Huntington's disease realm of taking this work into a population that has basically been told your life is a coin toss. So, you know, that kind of dealing with that level of uncertainty and that level of fear on a constant basis just wreaks havoc in your life in a way that I guess I'll get into a little bit afterwards. But that that low point, or that point where somebody feels like I have to do something now, is the only point you can help these people, any people. Like if it doesn't hurt bad enough, then it's not gonna work. You can apply as many beautiful, wonderful techniques, neuroscience, if it doesn't hurt bad enough, they will not put in the effort it takes to succeed in healing anything in their life. It's just, it's like that dog story sitting on the rusty nail, you know, like the guy walks by a couple times. He's like, why is that dog still crying? And he's like, oh, he has a nail in his, you know, in his foot. And the person asks, you know, why doesn't he move? Because he doesn't hurt bad enough.
Right.
So he just sits every day with that nail in his foot. So I really feel for people who are in that life sucks, but not bad enough that being uncomfortable is available to me.
Yeah. And that your resiliency and your capacity for, you know, coping, like when we're in that place where we're just coping and we're not ready to change yet because there hasn't been anything happening. We have less and less coping as we start to make those changes. Like for instance, a couple months ago, I had a sort of depressive episode, and it was because my shit was up and I wasn't looking at it, and I couldn't figure out, I was trying to look at it, but I was kind of like avoiding this one topic. And for like 2 weeks, my husband's like, you're just depressed right now. I'm like, I know. And I remember I had a moment where I was like, it wasn't even near as bad as it has been in my life. Nowhere near. I just had low energy and I was kind of a little bit like bombed every day. But I had this moment of where I'm like, no, like I'm like, something's changing sooner this time, you know, like you don't have, it's like, I'm not willing to let myself be in that place anymore because I know I can change. And I think that's what we build as we have these moments where if we act on them, and our allowance of like life being uncomfortable and knowing that we can change, this just gets less and less. Like I'm not willing to let myself sit in that place anymore. And I will dig in harder because I'm not, you know, I know that I can create change. But that moment before you have that first sort of thing, you're right. I do. It's those moments. And I often tell people, like, I ask them, are you ready? Are you really ready? You know, because what we're doing here isn't going to make a difference unless you're ready to like give it your all and willing to do whatever it takes. And it's not me going to do anything. It's going to be you doing all the work. So, yeah. So with your, you know, I know for myself, I deal with chronic pain off and on. And I know a lot of people out there do. What are some of your practices and and tools that you use for chronic pain, because chronic pain is this funny thing, right? Like maybe it'll go away one day and we'll never experience it, but maybe not.
Most likely, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those hard things that can really, it really affects, as all things do that we work with that are hard to work with. But chronic pain can affect your life in so many ways, because it can take you away from your family. It can take you away from your work. It can take you away from a practice you love to do. You know, I know for me, yoga is a great practice, but sometimes I can't do much besides just lie on my mat, you know, and that's my practice. I can't move, and I like to move. So I would love to hear your sort of journey with that, but also, you know, how you work with it.
Okay. So how I work with it, is a multi-dimensional approach. So anytime you're dealing with a chronic pain issue, everything has to be considered. What you're eating, how you're sleeping, your movement practice. So I would say, I don't like using shoulds, but let's say a necessary part of your healing is specific mindful movement for your particular condition. So it doesn't mean jump into the first yoga class or movement class that you see online, because you can cause a lot of damage to existing injuries and nerve tissues. We'll just won't get into that. Just something specific for you, because that's a very key piece of it, and something progressive in nature where you know where you are now and where you're going. Always having a measurable goal. Besides sleep, nutrition, movement practice, meditation, mindfulness training. This is your brain ninja. This is the way that you actually rewire the way that you're perceiving the world and the way the input is coming inwards. So I've seen a lot of people who have different pain conditions, and I worked at a pain clinic for about 1.5 years, doing my practicum and doing my work. And there are common traits with people who have chronic pain, and usually high levels of perfectionism. There are a history of mental health. So history of either trauma or depression was pre-existing. Sometimes it wasn't, and it followed afterwards. But once the pain is there longer than 6 months, you start to have rewiring happening. So now your nervous system gets highly sensitized to input coming in, where littler things are going to cause a pain response, and the things you're already doing are causing a more of a sensation of pain than is necessarily reflected in your tissues. So it starts to become a process of elimination, and how you can create routines with proper goals to get to where you want to go. And that being said, I have very strict morning rituals and evening rituals that I personally do in order to be optimally balanced, performance-wise, dealing with people, working with clients. Those are my non-negotiables, or I can't do the work that I do. And that was just it took a few years and a lot of training to understand what that was, and also to take the pieces of the new neuroscience and understand chronic pain from a physiological level, and then from a mental level, and then from a traumatic level of why I was a good candidate to have pain happen for a longer period of time. I already had a past history. So if you have a past history of depression or trauma, you are more likely to develop chronic illnesses as an adult. So that's really important for people to know. It'll show up in other ways when it is unresolved, because the nervous system gets triggered very easily. Your immune system will go down, and it'll leave you susceptible to a lot of things. And one of the things that I happened to be susceptible to was, after the car accident, not healing, not having the right input and the right systems around me to heal those injuries. And also, a lot of the practitioners back then had no idea how to help me, and they didn't ever say that. They just tried. They were like, oh, we'll just crack here, we'll put a heat pack there, well, whatever. And I'm like, it's been 1.5 years. I read on the line that it should take 4 to 6 weeks for this thing to heal up. What's going on? And then the depression that happens after that, because like you said, you lose everything. Like, I couldn't work, so I had no sense of purpose. You take away a human sense of purpose, you take away a huge part of their reason for getting up in the morning. Still happens, you see, with people or men who lose their jobs and have families. That sense of purpose goes, the depression is right leading after that.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to properly care for my mom the way that I wanted to. It was extra burden having to care for someone who was degenerating on different levels. I was very quick to anger. Anger was like a huge part of my journey for 10 years, trying to not eliminate anger. Anger is a necessary emotion, but when it's overly angry for everything and you're not pleasant to be around, it makes life a lot worse. That's a lot worse. So if anybody's listening at home and you have these kind of chronic injuries, or you have these things that you haven't worked through, see somebody and interview the people you're going to see if you can trust the person that you're working with, that they actually know what they're doing in terms of your care plan, and you get along in a way enough that you trust each other to show up. So they trust that you're there because you have a really strong intention to be there. And then you trust them to give you the necessary components you need to get to the next level of your life. So that kind of relationship, that dynamic with either like a psychotherapist, yoga therapist, somatic therapist, whatever that is for you, whatever your first step into that pathway is, just take that step in. Figure out what that dynamic is that's going to take you from point A to your next point, and go for it. But that won't happen unless somebody has a really strong reason for it.
Yeah.
So
the why is huge.
The why is trumps every technique you can have. The why trumps it. If you don't have a reason why, and for chronic pain people, if you're listening, if your reason why is to not have pain, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. That is not enough of an input to your brain and I would say the layers of your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain there, to give you the rewards you'll need and the incentive motivation to actually do the work. Because like Kelsey has mentioned several times, relapse is a part of the part of the process, and we've all been through it. And you can have these little gains, and yes, you feel good, you start doing more, and then you drop back, and that drop back is bad. That is not a fun place to be, especially the first couple times where you don't know that it's coming, and you just think all the work you did was for nothing. It's a really low place to be. And if you don't have that support person that I mentioned to reflect to you that this is a part of the process, you're going to, there's other steps to take now while you're in acute phases, and we're going to help you get to where you were and back on the up. That deters a lot of people, a lot of people from keeping going.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so where part of my chronic pain is with endometriosis, and I'm on this path of healing it. And literally, if that was my reason to not be in pain, I had an episode. I've made leaps and gains with it. And literally 2 months ago, I had the worst episode in my entire life of having to deal with this. And if it hadn't been with my why, which is deeper, which is I want to be able to show up for the people that I'm working with. I want to be available to support people in the way that I didn't have the support. That's my why. That's my huge why. And I want to be able to show up in my relationship with my husband and be able to support him. Those, like, I even feel like a little emotion speaking about that. And if it was to not have pain, I would have maybe given up. Because I was a mess for a week. Like, my brain, because the pain was so intense, my brain stopped functioning. I literally couldn't put sentences together. And I had such a high fever too that anyways, but I was on this path of working with it, and basically working with my naturopathic doctor. And she, so amazing. She's like, I don't want to discount what happened, but we're on the right path. We just did too much. Okay. This is working. This is doing exactly what we needed to. We just did too much. And we don't know. It's the same with, Western medicine. Sometimes you get given a dose of something and it's too much. So
it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what do you, I'd love to hear how you work through your days where you are in pain and you do have those moments of like, okay, here I am again. This is up. I'm having to deal with this. What are your sort of tools that you give to yourself, or how do you work through those days?
Firstly, I probably cry. I probably just mourn the loss. at first, because for me, I'll wake up and I won't be able to move. And that initial jolt to the nervous system, when you move your head and you get this shearing, like it's like someone stabbing you in the back in different areas, it's like it takes your breath away. And so sometimes the first thing I do is just I have to just let that go, because and then because it triggers the past decade of living with that and never knowing how I'm going to wake up in the morning. Can I move today? That type of anxiety that you get living in that fear response, when that comes back after, like, say, a long stint, it's just a blow. It's just like this big blow, and I have to process that blow. Once the tears run and I can reason with it, let the emotions run. The worst thing to do is to hold back the emotions and to pretend it's not, like, I'm not a think positive kind of person. I know a lot of my field is affirmations. I use affirmations in a very neuroscientific way. I do not use them as fluffers. I don't use positive, quote unquote, thinking to replace a negative. I go to neutrality. So that works for me. So when I'll give you an example. I had worked the last 4 months with our colleague, Summer Huntington. It has taken me 5 years to be able to hold a weight in my hand without having a relapse instantaneously. So I don't know if anybody can fathom with that. We're talking 3 and 5 pounds. That's not a lot of weight. This is how sensitive, when we're talking of a nervous system, is that I literally could not do anything that I wanted to do physically because of it. So I trained strategically for 4 months. And I went to training last week in Colorado, or I went to training recently in Colorado. And the day of my training, my seminar, I had been there for 3 days already. I had the worst relapse I had in 7 months. I had 7 months of pain-free living, relatively, of acceleration, muscle growth, confidence, strength. The day that I was to go to my training, I had a relapse. And let me tell you everything that ran through my head. Could you imagine? I wake up at 6:30 in the morning. I do a specific movement practice on different days of the week. I meditate. I take cold showers. I've been taking cold showers for 5 months to reboot my nervous system. And that's something, if you have mental health issues or chronic pain issues, please research cold therapy and cold showers, and even Wim Hof method. This is a really emerging field that it can reboot your nervous system in a way that is very fast and very quick to see results in different ways. So I won't go on too much about that. But all that work I had put in, and to wake up on the most important day of almost my year, I felt like I had wasted my time. It was like such a letdown. It was like I woke up to my nightmare, and I was just crying on the floor, and my best friend came with me, and she's the reason I get through everything, because anytime I have that low point, she's just like in my corner. She's just in my corner, like, just sometimes she doesn't say anything because she knows she can't, because if she says anything, I'm reactive. So she's already found my patterns of what not to say. So that sometimes saying less is better. And she just sat beside me while I cried on the floor, and I had to process that. I had to process that this happened, that I worked this hard, and this happened right now. And then I had to put it into perspective, because I have this ability now, after years of mental training. We're talking years of everyday meditating, everyday practicing, to be aware of the fluctuations of my mind. I could have a sense that this is the first relapse I had in 8 months, and this is actually the biggest win I've ever had. It is bad timing. It is just inconvenient timing. Because to go from, to give people a perspective, I would wake up never knowing if I could move my neck side to side, and I still had a physical job, and I still had to take care of my mother. That amount of stress, I couldn't even imagine at that point that I would go 2 months without pain. So I started in my accelerated healing, was like a 2 month stint with no pain, relapse, really bad relapse. Then I went 3 months, really bad relapse, to now I got to 8 months. I have never been 8 months without pain every day in my body. And so when it happened again, it was a huge blow, but I had already trained the resources and I had the support. Literally, I had my best friend and I had my practice in my body trained to handle it. And I handled it. And I did the training. I couldn't move my neck. I took some painkillers. I put my lotion on my back. I knew I couldn't do much. I had to modify everything with a chair. Luckily, I'm a chair yoga teacher and I'm working on doing that as a training for people. So I had the tools and the resources necessary to move through that. Had they not been in place, could have ended up being the ruining of my trip, but I did not allow it to ruin my trip. And I did not allow it to ruin the games that I had. And I did not allow it to take the successes around it, because to come from where I was, to have this amount of time and then a relapse is for me the biggest gift that I've ever been able to achieve in terms of the chronic pain field in my body.
Beautiful. Oh, that's such an empowering story.
But it's about the training. You gotta you have to train when it's not the worst.
Yes. Yes. How hard is that? Yeah. I only want to meditate when it's I only feel motivated to meditate when it's bad. Not when I'm feeling it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love, I'm a huge advocate for everyday having a personal practice. I'm also really rebellious against anything telling me what to do, including myself. So for me, because I have that personality, and I've had it with all of my teachers, there comes a point where I'm like, I'm good enough. I'm like surviving and I'm good enough. I don't need to do what you're telling me to do anymore. And it's a really strong battle for me, but, so I personally know how hard it is to get up and have your practice every day, but I just would there's not many people that actually I'm blessed to know a lot of people because of the field that I'm in and the contacts I keep, and because I want to surround myself with people who can inspire me. And you've definitely inspired me in that way, because your daily practice, I mean, I've watched it. I've watched you change and transform, and I have the blessing of being able to do that with a lot of people over the last 10 or 11 years since I really fully stepped into this field. But I would love how you said that your practices are non-negotiable. And I would love for you to talk about, just your daily practice. And you don't need to necessarily tell us, you told us a little bit about what you do, but the importance of having a daily practice. And when I say daily, I mean, it's every day. There's no day off.
There's no day off.
We may take a day off because we are rebelling against what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
There is no day off. Yeah.
There is no day off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I live yoga. Yoga is not something that I do per se. It's just a way of life. It's a state that you cultivate so that you can cope with the suffering of life. I see the world as a series of sufferings, and I guess that's a very different view. I shouldn't say different view, but I really resonate with the old philosophical texts, the Buddhism and where they talk about just this suffering as a human condition, and whatever labels you want to give it, stress, mortgage, blah 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 blah. Bottom line, it's making you unhappy on a regular basis, and you can't cope with it. So I learned in my yoga therapist training, my teachers are very big on personal practice. We're not encouraged to do any sort of group activities unless it's like a training or once a week, because it doesn't accurately reflect what you need as an individual moving forward in your body. And I'm a big advocate of that too. So I started to develop a routine, and for anybody who has mental health issues, it's helpful for everybody, but say especially for mental health. And I consider chronic pain a mental health issue because it stems a lot from more so in your brain mechanics than it does in your physical biology. And this is the links that people don't often get to. They think if they fix my shoulder, it's going to change it. It might not. It's like a feedback loop. So I was encouraged to do that. So it started with like a smaller meditative practice, constant. But because I was so broken, I literally couldn't go to any sort of group classes. There's just nowhere for me to go. So I had to work with my teachers, do a strict program. So I'll give you an idea what it has evolved to, from little bits to a train on a 4-day wave. This comes from the CST training from the Summer Huntington's Club of Yoga series. So I have my days set to low intensity, no intensity, low intensity, moderate intensity, high intensity days, and they're spread out according to my schedule. So my higher intensity days, I'm working on lightweight training in circuit training with yoga practices specific to my upper back, my shoulder, my scapular rotation, and freeing up the movement, and not just freeing it up, but then stabilizing the muscle structures that are causing, let's say, the neck to be more sensitive to movements in space. So that kind of conditioning work that I do, it always starts with tissue release and rolling. So I have therapeutic balls that I use, and I take out the knots before I do anything. I mobilize my joints, and then I get into practice. I do the practice. Practice always ends with relaxation and meditation. I cannot skip those two pieces. The meditation piece sets me up that I know the difference between my thoughts being my reality and my thoughts being thoughts. So you probably get that. Like, you're like, So you could see them float by. You know that they're not you. You can start to influence how you are perceiving the world. And then I set the tone for the day with whatever intention is my day. Bulletproof coffee, cold shower, get ready, and go. So it sounds like a lot. And then for I wouldn't say a regular person, just say for a person who doesn't have that kind of maintenance schedule, it could seem like a lot, but the first from 6:30 to about 9 a.m., that's my time. That's my day. That's my pieces to care for myself. Towards the end of the day, depending on how much I've taught or what my activity was that day, I might end with a relaxation, or I'll end with just journaling and decomp in bed, just going through the day's events, checking in, how are you feeling today, what went well. It's very important to acknowledge what went well when you have a habit of negative thinking.
And especially with chronic pain, it's really easy to focus on what didn't go well. Or any sort of chronic thing.
So that what went well piece, I've learned that needs to be acknowledged on a regular basis. If I don't acknowledge what went well on a regular basis, it's very easy for me for the depressive thoughts to take over. It doesn't take very long because it's such a long habit. If you can look at it in the span of a lifetime, I'm going to be 32 by the time this airs. I spent the first 21 years in a thought and habit pattern that was negatively oriented. That is a long time for your brain to have those type of feedback loops and to take information from the outside and inside. And relatively only about less than a 10-year part where I've been rewiring it in various ways. So in the bigger context of it all, needs to be like, you have to have a wider lens and saying, it's not going to change overnight. Little things will change with the habit changes. Like as soon as your sleep improves, your mood's automatically a little bit different. Your body's going to be less susceptible to some things. And to get that, so that's like a huge component, a very huge component of circadian rhythms and getting your body into a routine that you can manage. And you set the routine. No one's setting it for you, but you set the routine. Your bedtime, your wake time, those are two key components. But in order to tolerate, sometimes you don't want to get out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to. And my body's going, oh, do we have to? And then my experience says, your alternative is to become very unpleasant to the people around you. And then you're going to have difficulty in your relationships again, and you're going to be short-tempered, and you're going to be asked a question that might be trivial, but you're going to explode, and then you're going to have a fight. And so you get out of bed. You just do it.
And the more, I also find the more you don't get out of bed, like say, for instance, you're just on this journey and maybe, I start my new clients and the people I work with, 5 minutes. That's all you have to do to start is 5 minutes. And everyone can do 5 minutes. And if you can't do 5 minutes, you need to really look at your life and ask yourself why you can't give yourself 5 minutes. And I understand new moms, maybe that 5 minutes isn't like right as soon as you get out of the bed, but you can give yourself 5 minutes during the day. And the mornings that you don't do it, or the days that you don't do it, you start to realize like, I could, I kind of had to clean up a little bit more after myself today. I always call it cleaning up. Like if you have a moment where you act, not in the most loving way, you need to clean it up. And that's part of the process too. And then you realize, I always, when I have those moments of like, maybe, with my, I have to eat a very specific, I call it nourishment plan instead of diet. And I have those moments of like, I'm just gonna go get that bag of, they're healthy chips, and I'll be fine. And I'll ask myself, sometimes I'll just go do it because I'll check in and be like, you know what, I can totally handle this right now. And I'm going to give myself a treat. And I haven't done it in months, and, and I'm totally fine with that. I have a little bit of a treat, but if I know I'm going from an emotional place or something, I do check in. And that goes back to your why. And also like creating, I like to give people like creating a statement of, what's a statement that you can say to yourself that will trigger you and be like, okay, I'm not going to do that, or I am going to get out of bed, because this is, and I think that's important too. And also being gentle with yourself on,
Allie agrees.
Yes. Being gentle. Yeah. On the days with yourself when you don't take care of yourself.
Meet Allie, everybody. Go outside. Go out the door. Okay, perfect. Sorry, guys. My dog.
That's fine.
She hears somebody outside. She's like, goes nuts. But I like the way you use cleaning up, because I never thought of it like that. But that's what it's like. You're cleaning up your messes from whatever you've left as carnage behind you.
Yes.
And you get a lot better at doing that. Well, first of all, avoiding it is the best thing. If you can't avoid it because you've had slip ups, or I've had that similar thing where I don't adhere to the diet plan that I'm supposed to. And I don't like diet. I like you called nourishing.
Yeah.
Nourishment.
Plan. Yeah. Nourishment
plan. That's a good way to phrase it also. It's your nourishment plan. Because it will inflame different parts, or it'll aggravate my bowels. My bowels get aggravated, then my depression kicks in like instantaneously. And you're like, well, how come I can't have control today? It's like, because you threw yourself off because you wanted to eat that because it just looked so good. And then, but how I learned to deal with that was just like right in the moment where you acknowledge that instead of having guilt around, I shouldn't have eaten that, and now I'm like this. It's like, I'm a human being and I need to forgive myself for that. So, and it's relatively in the scheme of life, it's a little blip in it. It's one moment. I can pick it up the next day, but the self-forgiveness work is super important. It goes back to that neutralization that I talked about of the emotion. It's not about making it positive or trying to change it like that. It just neutralize how you're dealing with it. So like take the edge off of it. So I use the Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian method. That is just the simplest thing. Even if I don't have any particular reasoning, thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Just let it come out of your mouth until you feel it dissipate. And that's how I gauge it. People say like, how long do you do it? Until it goes. Until it doesn't have the charge that it has. And know that the next day you have the ability to make different choices, and know that sometimes life happens and you're not going to make the best choices always. You just strive to make the best choices you can with what you have on whatever's presenting that day.
I love it. The Ho'oponopono, for those of you who are listening, is the Hawaiian ceremony of forgiveness. You can look it up. There's tons of resources out there.
It's so amazing. It's so, and even the backing behind it, and you can pull up how it actually does what it does. If more scientifically minded and that helps you to do something, then just look it up, because it's so simple. It's just you doing your own stuff. Nobody needs to be there. And it's a tool that you have once you learn it that just carries wherever you are.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Well, we've talked about so many great things today. I love ending on the Ho'oponopono piece and the self-forgiveness piece. It's such a good one. I would love for you to just share a little bit about, your business and how people can find you. And I know you're going to offer us a couple of goodies, some videos and stuff, and we'll have that all posted in the show notes. But yeah, let us know about your business and what you do and how people can find you.
Awesome. So I have a business called Sacred Mountain Yoga, and I operate out of Toronto, Ontario, and around the Greater Toronto area. I also have some YouTube resources available for different practices for people who have chronic pain and different injuries. If you want to get a hold of me, my website is www.smyoga.ca, and Kelsey will put that in the notes for you as well. You can also email me directly at info@smyoga.ca if you want, if any questions or concerns or specific things you're dealing with, and you just need another, I guess, a sounding board of some sort to reflect back what is possible in terms of a healing practice for you. And I would say that there will be a link provided for you to have a free audio download, a relaxation recording. I've used this relaxation for many of my students. Sometimes they find it a little bit difficult to do their home practices, so I start to record pieces. So I'll share that with you. It's about 20-minute recording. You could play it at night, or if you're feeling anxious, to help you ground in your body and neutralize. I would say neutralize and ease whatever is plaguing you at that present moment. It's a physical condition or a mental, something that's happening internally. It's a really great way to just take inventory, to relax your nervous system. There's a breathing accompanied with it that's specific. It's just a longer exhale to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. So switching from your very reactive fight, flight, or freeze to rest and digest, and give yourself that time to actually recuperate after, say, an episode or a stressful day. So that's my gift to you, because I know what it's like to be chronically stressed and have less desirable circumstances than you might want.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm excited to get that. I'm always looking for little meditations at night. That's when I like to sort of let myself be guided at night, so I can kind of turn off my brain and just let someone else take care of me. So I fall asleep to that kind of stuff a lot. So great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Natalie. And I'm excited to give all your resources to our listeners. And thank you for sharing so openly and honestly about your journey and, all that information. I would love for you too, if you have any books around what you're going through that have been helpful for you. Do you have anyone that comes to mind right now? Any books or resources, especially around, I feel like so what I'm studying right now too with the somatic experiencing and really diving in, it's all about neuroscience and the nervous system. And it's sort of this emerging field that's so helpful. Yeah. And I don't know if you have any resources around that, because I think that educational piece is going to be really important for everyone in this field moving forward.
Yes. A few things come to mind, and I'll put them in this way. If you're listening and you're very scientifically minded, and if it helps you to understand before you do something, look up the work of Lorimer Moseley. He does the Explain Pain things, and he can really detailed explain to you the mechanics of what's happening in a chronic condition. That's very helpful for people who need to know why certain practices work. That's like, I'll say first and foremost, Lorimer Moseley. He's got free YouTube stuff online, lectures, series. He's got a book that's called Explain Pain. He also has the Explain Pain Handbook, which is an interactive one that you can go through and assess a little bit more of a self-assessment and see where you are and where you could potentially get to. So he's great. He's located in Australia, but all his stuff is available online. You just got to Google him. And I would say that one that I'm reading now, which I've been following for a while, is the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. You familiar with him?
I've heard of him.
So his work is phenomenal as well. The book that I'm currently dove into was Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. This is, if you want to put the how-to to the why, this is the one. So this is the one that will break down how you're experiencing reality as it's presenting. What are the feedback loops that are coming in, how you as a human being are wired up, and how you can change those patterns of behavior to actually become a different person. And I'm an advocate of this becoming a different person, because when people say generally, like, just be yourself, but you're a collection of circumstances and reactions and habits. Like, maybe you don't want to be yourself. Like, maybe yourself, like, I don't want to be the person who reacted to a trauma when I was 9. I want to be, Wonder Woman. I want to be stronger than that. So to actually say, like, who you are now is not who you have to be. It's not taking away from your person or your personality per se, but about how you are really engaging with your daily activities and what that's creating as a reality for you. And if you want a different body and you want a different life, you actually have to be a different person. You have to grow into that person who lives that life that you want. So I would say a coupling of those two would be my recommendations. There's so many to like go through, but just to keep it as simple as that, there's like what it is if you're dealing with a lot of chronic pain stuff and you really want a scientific, easy to understand, explain pain, Lorimer Moseley. And if you really want to dive in, like, I'm ready to do this, break the habit of being yourself.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Natalie. Thanks for all of your wisdom. And we look forward to probably interviewing you again, because there's so many things.
So yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
There's so many little tangents we could have gone off on today. And I'm just really grateful for everything you shared. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blessing. I'm so happy to even see your face again. It's been a long time, and I hope that I get to see you in person sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Okay. Bye.
Bye.